In Unit 4 of Intergovernmental Relations comparing the European Union and Canada, we actually look just at intergovernmental relations and the policy process. So we're not looking at actors and the diversity of actors. We're not looking at the specifics of the institutional framework versus the politics of policy making, but we're just looking at a specific relationship. And we compare and contrast Canada and the EU just regarding the intergovernmental relation part of this. We are pointing to one thing that I think is very often very surprising to Canadian students, is that intergovernmental relations in Canada, as understood by scholars and policy experts, mean the relationship between the federal and the provincial levels of governments only. And one of the things that this unit is looking at is, and that's what I'm saying with surprise, it doesn't always work well. And so I detail this and I make you read on this so that you understand why provinces with the federal governments don't always work as well and as smoothly as they would like to, as smoothly as everybody would like to, and where these tensions are coming from. And we compare this to the Canadian system. We compare these sometimes difficult relationship in Canada to the European system, looking at tensions in the European system to produce policies, and how the intergovernmental relations, the relationship between single governments in the EU, each government on its own, with the collective together, within, let's say, a Council of Ministers across a specific policy, let's say Council of Ministers in charge of economic issues, or Council of Ministers in charge of monetary policy like the Euro, Council of Ministers in charge of regional policy, would act and impose decisions on two single members that refuse them. And so it's very interesting because, as I said, we discover that the difficulty the European member states have is a difficulty that provinces in Canada, the provincial governments and the federal governments, and the federal government also have from time to time. So we look at how these governments are interacting with each other, what are the strengths and the weaknesses in their relationship, what are the goals and sometimes interest-based issues that are recurrent, what are the different ways that they have to resolve issues, whether they go to court, for instance, on a regular basis against each other, or whether it is enough to negotiate and to find resolution to disputes, and whether they have the ability, the capacity to do this effectively on their own. We also look at intergovernmental relation in the context of more complex relations. So we look at this relationship, this in a way bilateral relationship between two governments or two levels of governments in a context where the relations would be more complex. So what happens when we have a context of multi-level governance? What does this mean for the relationship at the core, federal, provincial, or state in the member state of the EU with the EU level, and the tensions between this core relationship once the relationship is written into a policy where you have a network of actors that are interacting, where the multi-level governance becomes much more complex, including public, private, non-for-profit actors involved. This is a very interesting unit if you're interested in policy and if you're interested in the relationship between the different actors without looking at the diversity of actors, but just at the difficulty of the relationship. The material is the same as in most units. You have 2 chapters and a little bit more of readings if you want, and a couple of video clips where you can look at, interviews of ministers and people really like a minister in charge of intergovernmental relations that talks about the relationship between two provinces and the relationship between the province and federal level, just so you see how these people talk about their difficulties and how they resolve their problem. Thank you very much.